holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy should itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. And Patrick Wood here for Technocracy News and Trends, Editor-in-Chief and Chief Cook and Bottle Washer here at Technocracy News and Trends. I'm glad to be back with you today, and we're going to dive right back into the global warming conflict that's happening all over the planet. Well, it's not much of a conflict, but there's a lot of arguing going on, a lot of trolling, a lot of ignorance being passed around. Several days ago, I published an article on the pages of Technocracy News and Trends called Climate Scientists Write to UN, There is No Climate Emergency. This was simply a letter that was written to the United Nations. In particular, it was addressed under the cover of Professor Gus Burkhout, and it was supposedly signed by 500 scientists and concerned people that study global warming. I did not sign this petition, by the way. I might have if it was offered to me. But in any case, it was just another post, and I thought, this is interesting, and it's something that people should see, at least be aware of, that there are dissenting scientists in the world that do not go along with the standard man-caused global warming propaganda. Well, this article created a firestorm, and I dare say there has been at least 50 to 60,000 people who have visited the pages of Technocracy News and Trends just in the last few days to read this article and comment on the article as well. Many people have commented, and many people have trolled it and insisted that it's just a bunch of BS, and who are those people anyway, and blah, blah, blah. And I have to say that I get a little bit aggravated with people who read a letter like this that I might post on Technocracy News and Trends and then get mad at me because they don't have enough information, at least of what they think is enough information, and they think that I should go and do their research for them. They demand to know more, and with the implication that somehow I should go off and do the research for them. Well, needless to say, I simply just either ignore those people or I tell them to get off their lazy keisters and go do their own research, for Pete's sake. I'm not their slave. I'm simply doing a job reporting on things that appear to be important as far as technocracy is concerned. That article was very important as far as technocracy was concerned, and that's why it appeared on the pages of Technocracy News and Trends. Well, another article is coming out today. CO2 is plant food. The title starts out, Australian group signs international declaration denying global warming. Well, here we go again. I'm looking at a picture of kangaroos in a field right now, and I'm thinking, here we go, hippity hop, all over the planet again, with people getting all huffy about, who are those scientists anyway? And, they're probably all paid off by the big oil industry or coal or something like that. I wrote at the top of this article, in typical climate shaming manner, the Guardian newspaper, they're the ones that actually carried the story, first notes what the group did, then ridicules them for denying climate science, when in fact they're denying man-made or man-caused global warming, nothing more and nothing less. But they're immediately labeled as science deniers, which is patently ridiculous when you consider, for instance, how can an esteemed physicist or atmospheric scientist be anti-science? That just doesn't make sense. I've mentioned more than once, by the way, that all of the rhetoric we see about things relating to scientism and how truth is only discovered through science is actually anti-science itself. It's not pro-science. It actually is anti-science because it suppresses the free inquiry for information and discovery of truth. So this story starts out, a group of 75 Australian former and current business figures, including mining engineers and retired geologists, have signed on to an international declaration targeting the UN and the EU and claiming, quote, there is no climate emergency, and that, quote, CO2 is plant food. As a side note, let me say that I learned that CO2 is a plant food when I entered first grade. One of the initial projects the teacher pulled out were some paper cups and some dirt and some beans, that is, bean seeds, and we all created a little cup full of dirt, put a bean seed down in the middle of it, watered it a little bit. She said, stick that over there by the window and watch what happens. And after the next 3 weeks, why, the little bean came up, sprouted, reached out to the sun, soaked up the water, began to grow a plant. It lived on CO2. We're thankful that it also exhales oxygen. We all like to breathe oxygen, don't we? The story goes on. Several of the signatories to the group, which identified itself as Int'l, have high-level links to conservative politics, industry, and mining. They include Hugh Morgan, a former president of the Business Council of Australia, and Ian Plimmer, a director on Gina Reinhardt's Roy Hill Holdings iron ore project. The move is designed to coincide with the UN's Climate Action Summit and General Assembly in New York. Also signing the declaration is Dr. Peter Ridd, the former James Cook University scientist who claims that devastating bleaching events on the Great Barrier Reef are not driven by climate change. Ridd was backed by Queensland's beef and sugarcane industries to deliver a speaking tour in an attempt to undermine the science linking runoff from farms and poor water quality to coral declines. His views have helped force a coalition-backed Senate inquiry into reef science. The former chief scientist Ian Chubb compared Ridd's efforts to the misinformation campaigns run by the tobacco industry on the impacts of cigarettes on public health. Now here we get into the climate shaming and basically calling all of these people idiots. The Int'l group, by the way, is the same group that was mentioned in the first article that says climate scientists write to UN there is no climate emergency. This is the Australian contingent of that group. In an open letter addressed to the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and the UN's chief climate negotiator, Patricia Espinosa Quintellano, the group describes the benefits of cutting greenhouse gas emissions as imagined. One ambassador of the group is a Queensland coal mining veteran, Viv Forbes. Another is well-known British peer Christopher Monckton, who once likened the leading Australian economist and climate advisor, Professor Ross Garnaut, to a Nazi. Well, it's interesting. I happen to know, personally, Lord Christopher Monckton. He's an interesting character for sure, but he's a very, very bright guy. I've also corresponded with Viv Forbes from Australia. She's sharp as a tack as far as climate change is concerned and the hypocrisy of it all. She also is a reader. In fact, both of them are readers of Technocracy News and Trends. This post continues. The letter repeats well-worn and long-debunked talking points on climate change that are contradicted by the scientific institutions and academies around the world, as well as the assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. The letter says, scientists should openly address the uncertainties and exaggerations in their predictions of global warming, while politicians should dispassionately count the real benefits as well as the imagined costs of adaptation to global warming and the real cost as well as imagined benefits of mitigation. So this article starts out simply stating the fact, and then it degrades into a climate shaming session where these people are ridiculed or browbeat, and I seriously doubt if they were expecting anything else, but this is where the media is today around the world. So in any case, here's another group. It's not just those other 500 on the Int'l report that was mentioned earlier. The Australian group has come forward and said, yep, CO2 is plant food. People, wake up. If we don't have plants, we don't have food. And we need CO2 and lots of it to produce crops and grow trees, vegetables, and everything else that makes the world go round. We simply cannot do without it. The next story in the lineup is China is breaking news again on having created the most powerful camera on the face of the planet. Catch this, 500 megapixels. It's being dubbed the super camera. And the point of it is it can identify thousands of people instantly in a crowd. Basically, it simply photographs the entire crowd and then feeds it into a high-speed AI program for facial recognition, and voila, everybody's identified at the same time. Conversely, it can also pinpoint a specific person in real time as well, because it can analyze everybody. It can also pick out that one you're looking for and follow him until the police catch up with him. I wrote at the top of this article, social engineering is the plain objective of China's massive surveillance industry, which should be expected in a nation run by technocracy. And yes, China is a technocracy. Forget the trappings of communist China, even though it's still there and it still looks like communist China. They have morphed at least 20 years ago into a full-blown technocracy which practices social engineering. This camera explodes surveillance to the next level. The article states scientists have unveiled a 500 megapixel cloud camera system in China that they say is capable of capturing the facial details of each individual in a crowd of tens of thousands of people. Raising fears, facial recognition monitoring could soon reach a new level. The camera, which was revealed at China's International Industry Fair last week, was designed by Fudan University and Changchun Institute of Optics, Fine Mechanics, and Physics of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. The camera's resolution is 5 times more detailed than the human eye, and it is also equipped with artificial intelligence, facial recognition, real-time monitoring, and cloud computing technology, designers say. All of this means it can detect and identify human faces or other objects and instantly find targets, even in a crowded stadium. One of the scientists who worked on the new technology explained to reporters at the exhibition display. He said this device, dubbed the super camera by local media, can capture both still images and record video as well. Australian freelance technology journalist Alex Kidman said the camera was technically feasible, but there were potential difficulties. The challenge for a camera of this scope, especially in a cloud-led AI environment, is the quality of the data that's needed to shuffle around for identification. As you raise the detail level of each image, as the Fudan University scientists have done, you seriously raise the size of the files, especially for video, a substantial amount, Kidman said. And he's absolutely right. But this is a solution, by the way, that's begging for 5G millimeter wave Wi-Fi to be installed that will provide not only instant connections to the cloud, but also the highest speed of upload of images that they've ever seen before. China will perfect their surveillance system using 5G. I've said for a long time now that 5G is the Achilles heel of technocrats and technocracy everywhere in the world. If they get away with this and get it implemented like they're doing in China, the rest of the world will be captured into a scientific dictatorship from which there may be no escape. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be very difficult. So, China is expanding its social credit system as a result of this. This article goes on and lays it out just very plainly. For the last few years, it states China has been developing a social credit system intended to be rolled out nationwide, which assesses citizens and businesses by economic and social reputation. Social credit is like a scorecard for each of China's 1.4 billion citizens and millions of businesses now. Just this month, China announced plans to push ahead with a corporate ranking system that will affect 33 million companies. That includes United States companies as well operating in China. The system for citizens is designed to value and engineer better individual behavior by awarding the trustworthy and punishing the disobedient. Top citizen scores can earn VIP treatment at hotels and airports, cheap loans, and a fast track to the best universities and jobs. Those with lower scores can be banned from travel or barred from getting credit or government jobs. The system is enforced by surveillance cameras equipped with facial recognition, like the super camera, of course, body scanning and geo-tracking to cast a constant gaze over citizen. The new 500 megapixel camera could make that process much more efficient. Well, there's that word efficient again. That's a sure sign that you're close to a technocrat when you hear them start talking about efficiency. This will indeed be efficient, able to identify a single person out of a crowd of thousands of people as in a stadium. Well, China, we'll be watching for your technology to show up in America sooner or later. We know it will. It may not be what you invented specifically, but somebody here in America, some enterprising person will get the idea, gee, I could build something like that. Why don't I do that? That would just be a wonderful thing to have over here in America. The last story we're going to take a look at today is something that also has been discussed multiple times over the past 2 or 3 years, and that is universal basic income. A new Harris poll came out just this week and has stated that 49% of voters across America now support universal basic income. Now, if you don't remember what that is, that's where the government just gives you a stipend, like say $1,000 or $1,500. You just receive that check every month, and you don't have to do a thing for it. They don't care if you're working or not working. They don't care if you have a good job or a bad job. But everybody in society simply would get some kind of a stipend. Most people that push UBI typically will talk about a low amount of money, like $1,000, but the amount is immaterial. It's still free money, they say. I wrote in this article, in a short 8-month period, the approval figure went from 43% to 49%, a 6-point increase. Opposition likewise dropped 6 points. Only madness and total ignorance believes that there is a free lunch. UBI is a direct descendant, by the way, of 1930s technocracy, which believed that everyone in society would receive a monthly stipend to cover all of their living needs. This article starts out and says support for the universal basic income, that's UBI, is on the rise, according to a new Hill-Harris X poll released on Wednesday. The nationwide survey found that 49% of registered voters are in favor of a government-issued basic living stipend, which marks a 6-point spike compared to a similar survey in February. Support for UBI remains particularly popular among young people. 72% of those between the ages of 18 and 34 favor the idea. Now think about that just for a minute. Almost 3/4 of everyone between the ages of 18 and 34, that's the new young generation coming up, agree and believe in universal basic income. But the proposal still isn't as highly favored among older generations of Americans, by the way, who know there isn't any such thing as a free lunch. Only 26% of those 65 and older back a UBI program. Democrat support for UBI increased from 54% to 66%, as did support among independents, which ticked up to 48%. 30% of Republican respondents, meanwhile, said they would support a UBI plan. Democrat presidential candidate Andrew Yang has centered his outsider campaign on a version of UBI which pledges to give every American adult $1,000 a month. The entrepreneur has touted the plan as a way to tackle the rising threat of automation. Now, this is just a simple statement here, but let me explain. The technocrat mindset in this is that automation, robots, and stuff like that are displacing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of workers over the next few years, that these unemployed people will form a new class in America called the unemployables. They believe, that is the technocrats believe, that they will never find a job again and that they will indeed just be unemployable. The answer to offset the almost certain backlash and revolution that would come as a result of the new unemployables class is to give them money. Simply give them $1,000 a month. Well, if you're thinking about this, you might be asking yourself, what can you do with $1,000 a month? Not much. Might pay somebody's rent, but it certainly will not be a livable amount of money. Where is Mr. Yang coming from on this, I wonder? The article continues, though Yang said his campaign received more than 500,000 entries for the contest he had, the plan has generated some criticism from his fellow contenders, including top-tier candidate Senator Bernie Sanders. Sanders told Hill TV last month that while there is no question that automation will have a fundamental impact on Americans, he argued that people want to work and to be a productive member of society. I want to suggest to Mr. Sanders and to others who are looking at Mr. Sanders as a viable candidate that he just made a statement of a Marxist. Andrew Yang is not a Marxist. He's a technocrat. Make a distinction. There's more compassion, perhaps, and more common sense in socialism and Marxism than there is in technocracy. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not proposing or supporting Marxism, communism, or socialism. I'm just making an observation. If you think those are off the rails, you ain't seen nothing until you look at technocracy. That's why I keep pounding on this day after day, week after week. That's why there's almost 3,500 stories from all over the world posted on Technocracy News and Trends now. It's a research goldmine, by the way, fully indexed and fully categorized. You can find just about anything you ever wanted to know about technocracy and how it's working out in society today. I suggest you check that out sometime and just play around a little bit with the indexing feature. It's on the home page. You can't miss it. Well, enough for universal basic income, enough for total surveillance, and enough for climate change for one day and for 1 week. Honestly, I've had enough of it. I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. We'll see you next time.